Books are safer than other people. The quote has stuck with Tom for years, not by the virtue of its truth, but because it was the only thing he'd ever read that Neil Gaiman had gotten wrong. Well, not wrong precisely. Off. Books and the stories they contained were many things, but safe was not one of them. You read a book, and as your eye skimmed over the letters, letting them form into words, ideas could pounce on you when they were least expected. The stories might be good or bad, poorly or well written, and once an idea was there, it might never bear fruit. It could lay dormant forever. But it was still there. Even if an idea didn't change your mind, once you allowed someone else's thoughts into your own, you were no longer thinking in quite the same way as before. That made books strange and wonderful, and dangerous and valuable treasures, but that didn't make them safe. You could pass 1,000 people on the street and they'd never affect your life, but 1,000 stories? Remove just one and the whole would be diminished. Remove 1,000 and the patterns of who you were would be torn asunder. Now, he had a story to teach, a slice of history to be recounted, with its facts and lessons to learn, and it was neither safe, comfortable, nor something to be ignored. It was a benefit of age to reflect on all those lessons, all the myriad perceptions that jumbled and jostled against each other, looking for ways to fit like the pieces drawn from 1,000 different jigsaw puzzles. But that was life. The notion had been nagging at him since he'd woken up, a conviction that he couldn't pull any punches with this lesson. It needed to count. That was the thing about experience. Sooner or later, you arrived at a point where you had to choose what you were going to do with it. You looked at the picture those jigsaw pieces created, like some jumbled Picasso that was wholly and uniquely a portrait of yourself, and you had to make decisions. The days reaching out before you no longer seemed endless. They might be equal to the days behind you. They might be shorter. The open options and possibilities grew into familiar paths taken, and you stumbled upon the moment when you had to decide who you were and what you were going to do about it. If you weren't careful, it was a time when the dreams of youth became the regrets of maturity. As a Taoist, it meant reconciling the is of what you were to the is of the world, trying to get the one to fit comfortably with the other. When that happened, suddenly the puzzle wasn't a jumble any longer. In those moments, you could just be still, feel one with it all, and it was right and good. Not that every path was nice. Yes, he had a lesson to give to these young women. It was not an easy lesson, but that was the point. It was a jagged puzzle piece, made of torn and twisted steel with razor-sharp edges. It could be ignored and cast aside, but then you risked treading upon it in ignorance. Or it could be handled carelessly, and in doing so it would leave you bloody. Best for all concerned to take it with care and caution. And it was his to teach, to place it in their mouths like communion wafers and invite them to swallow. It felt cruel and dishonest and wrong, but that was the point of being a teacher. Sometimes you had to teach a lesson that wouldn't be forgotten in a hurry. Instead of chess club, the girls had come back to the classroom that afternoon, ready to fight a war. They understood the rules. They had a grasp of their roles and the empires they would lead as events unfolded. Some they might change. Some they could not. Regardless, they were going at it with a will. Just now, Tom watched as Zinshiki came last, expending her points for the 23rd turn. It was the first half of December, 1913. She'd purchased 2 more of the Congo-class battlecruisers than history allowed for, and just taken possession. It was a bit of a reach, but she'd gone for guns over butter, and made it work. Admit it, you just had to put the catgirl in Japan. Over at the chairs representing England, Letzi was still giving the Pezrin girl the eye, but both walked away from the deal satisfied. Money traded hands, and the arms began to flow. Of course, things happened. It was turn 5 of 1914, and Desala didn't grimace, but she grumbled under her breath.
I still don't like it. You don't have to like it, Desi muttered back. You wanted me to push the whole international prestige thing. The shipment got through. They have the weapons. And more importantly, we've painted ourselves as a reliable partner to the Mexicans, and anyone else that's interested. But I still had to clean it up by claiming that the freighter was part of our navy. I suppose it worked, Desala admitted grudgingly and shrugged.
Despite their dislike for one another, the German Empire was rumbling ahead. It was a pretty good move.
It was a listed option. I wanted us to go for full transparency, Desi hissed. We aren't at war with Belda. Why give the United States a reason to start thinking we're lying?
We aren't lying, but it's none of her damn business either, Desala spat out. So far, being the Kaiser hadn't posed any real issues, but Desi's advice on all things military was running counter to her experience with security. Belda, and anyone else, didn't need to know, so why tell them?
Let's just press ahead. Belda seems to have settled down over it all, and we even embarrassed her a little bit. We made good on our promises. Things are fine.
Lark was sitting alone, though Bree had shown up half an hour ago to watch the game. The professors had arranged their seating to group them somewhat like the map. That left Desi and Desala one row above on her right, while Nesfa was lurking around just above on her left. Jacksmi was down on her left in the front row. Things hadn't been going well, and it was getting on her nerves. Her empire was old, well established. She shouldn't have to deal with these constant uprisings, and while they were going on, all the other empires were spreading their wings, growing rich off the periphery territories. Alright, maybe not everyone. Nesfa wasn't doing much, but Russia was already huge. Jacksmi wasn't being very aggressive either, but she was taking in a lot of trade, while riding herd on a wave of reforms that had been threatening to come undone on her since the sim started. Off to her lower left in the first row, the twins playing the Kingdom of Italy were whispering, and occasionally looking her way. Who knew what they were up to? Not that the twins were alone in being secretive. She caught Nesfa eyeing her up, and the cheeky Turoks hadn't even bothered to hide her grin. After all, she was sitting there fat and happy.
You should be. I had to work my ass off to get a job at a night desk, and your house has a whole media empire.
Alright, that wasn't fair. Nesfa was alright. Sometimes when they talked, they had common ground, though it wasn't always easy. Particularly like now. Nesfa was there with a vast empire, while it felt like she was trying to hold on to sand with a sieve. She sighed. Her empire was an unwieldy beast, but things were moving along. It wasn't like she was the only one having problems. While the posturing between Belda and Desala calmed down, Belle was still carefully watching an ugly civil war rage along her southern border. Things could be worse. She opened the message that cleared out turn 12. Tom fired off the last message and waited for the turn to start. He'd set the rotation just so, and Austria-Hungary led off at the start of this month. He watched her open the message and...
They killed Franz! They killed Franz!
Kellogg slammed her fist down on the desk, raising her voice.
Those lousy, stinking Serbians! Those horrible, atrocity-filled vermin! They killed Franz! I'm going to grind them all into the Stone Age! Take that, you black-hearted slime!
Zinshiki frowned.
Hey!
Nesfa leaned her chin on one elbow and grinned down at the lower tier.
You know, that's why people like you, Lark. You're a real humanitarian. Lick me, Nesfa! You have 4 girls and a boy, but that's my heir they just killed!
Lark spun around in her seat and glared at the rest of Europe sitting around her.
This wasn't an accident. I have the intel.
Over in France, Pris leaned on an elbow and muttered,
You're having a psychotic episode. Thanks for sharing.
Tom watched the girls for a moment. Despite the initial pressure of Melondi playing a monarch, while possibly actually becoming a monarch, the girls are set to the exercise with a will. Each was playing to their strengths as individuals, teams and empires, but they were all in and going for it. Take 13 overachievers and stir. And time. That's a good stopping point, and it will give you all some time to fully consider your moves for next turn, Tom announced. As Lark spun around agog, he shrugged. Sorry, I have a honeymoon to pack for. We'll pick this up the day after tomorrow. He clasped his hands together and stretched his arms out before saving the display. So far, his copy of Strategic Command 1914 wasn't getting thrown anything the mob packs couldn't handle, and it tallied up the points. In the realm of guns or butter, all the girls had taken practical steps for butter points, like adopting the Universal Postal Union. At the same time, it seemed Shulvanti were being Shulvanti, and the girls were all hedging their way toward a much larger arms race. Belder had laid down a third Pennsylvania-class battleship. Mel was focusing England on trade, but had Letzi upgrading their fleet, while Desala had Desi quietly working on submarines. They were both keenly focused on land warfare. As Italy, the twins were holding their own in a trade dispute with Jacksmith's Ottomans, while off in Japan, Zinchiki was moving very quietly and had somehow finangled her way into Shandong and Xingzhou without firing a shot. Of course, Kellogg was spitting mad. Tom smiled ruefully, holding up his Omnipad. Oh, don't forget, I have movies for you ladies. No need to just yank off the band-aid without a peace offering. I swear I could hear her blood pressure rising. Melondi shook her head as she walked back towards the dorms with Letzi. It was a nice afternoon night for late fall, and while they were dropping as the sun dipped lower, temperatures were actually high in the 40s. She was pretty bent out of shape about it, Letzi nodded. I know she wants that extra credit, but her grades aren't that bad. Really? That pulled Melondi up short for a moment. I thought she had a rough time getting started here. How do you know? I heard her talking with Nesfer and Desi during study group. Letzi gave a little shrug. I mean, everyone wants it, but mostly I think she gets a little competitive with Nesfer. Why? You know them better. I mean, they get on pretty well. I guess it's just a feeling. Letzi felt the leaves scrunch under her feet as they cut across the green, avoiding the dips in the lawn where it was still wet from yesterday's rain. What are we going to do about it, anyway? I mean, Lark isn't our ally. Mel puffed out a breath of air, but didn't say anything for a few steps, before offering, It sort of depends on her. It didn't sound particularly convincing. Mel, do you mind if I ask you something personal? Letzi tried to keep the words light, even though she couldn't believe she had the audacity. She knew Melondi. Well, she was getting to, but Melondi was a princess. Part of her was screaming inside, but she was committed now. The event this afternoon? I mean, we all saw the chapter and know it was historical, but why? Why am I not getting worked up about it after the way my sister was killed? Yeah, that. Letzi kept walking beside her and nodded, not quite looking her way. I mean, I think everyone looked your way. Even Lark puckered up after she started working through the turn and got over how screwed she is now. I know, but maybe I can learn something useful from all this. It sort of feels like I've been holding my breath all these years. Melondi grinned ruefully. As long as I'm doing something about it, it's all right. You're going to be at the meeting tomorrow, right? Are you sure you want me there? Letzi hated the hesitation in her voice, but how could it not be? You have a lot of good people you can call on, right? Sort of, but reaching back to the people I usually trust doesn't feel safe. And I sort of have an idea. Her grin took on a rakish look, and she nodded. So yes, I definitely want you there. I appreciate that. Melondi. It's Melondi. She turned. And Letzi hoped that the awkward lurch she was feeling didn't show. If it did, Mel didn't give it away.
Look, I need to run and catch up with Desi before dinner. You did a terrific job with the military today, though. Really outstanding, Let's.
Melondi was already charging off as Letzi replied,
Sure thing.
She found herself nodding as she called out,
Just remember she's on the other side.
Well, that was a thing. A princess of the Empire complimented her on how well she ran a military. If she only knew the half of it. With time to plan their next moves, the girls all agreed to keep things separate. They could get together and take it easy, so long as the simulation wasn't discussed. It didn't come out at meals or in the study group. And there was time to plan. That meant using the afternoon for a strategy session, with each side taking over one of the conference rooms. By mutual consent, that kept it settled and out of the way. It seemed a practical solution to Zenshiki, as she settled in and listened to her allies. It still seemed like a waste of time, as the overall plan hinged on what Kellogg did the next turn, and the others fell to talking.
I miss chess, Sephin muttered, as they looked over the options. I like it a lot better than this.
Next to her partner, Prish shrugged.
They're both a matter of practical organization, planning, logistics. Your family's pharma company has to do a lot of that, right? You sound like my co-mother.
Sephi rolled her eyes as she slouched down in the chair.
I know it's important, but that doesn't mean I like it better. We'll get back to chess club. And I have the Bokken from Vadim, so we can try our hands at Idol, if anyone else is interested, Melondi offered. Desi has the movies for tomorrow night, too. Wish I could be there, but not too much, Belder grinned. I'm picking Liam up at 7, and it's the big night. Look at you, taking the plunge.
Nesfa leaned in and grinned wickedly.
Decided where you're taking him to pop the question? Well... Belder blushed. I haven't decided yet. I was thinking somewhere quiet, Make it personal.
Despite her natural inclination not to get involved, Zenshiki couldn't help herself.
That would be a mistake. Excuse me? Belder blinked. What's wrong with that? It is not how a Pezrin would do these things.
Zenshiki sighed inwardly, but she was committed to this trivial conversation now.
To be alone for such an event would be very bad luck and make you look insecure, afraid to make your announcement before others. Now, this I've got to hear.
Nesfa arched a challenging eyebrow and canted her head.
So, how would you do it? That is simple, she replied, arching an eyebrow back. During courtship, you should always take a male somewhere exciting. That way they associate the pleasure of the moment with your company. Whatever your boyfriend enjoys, take him there, ideally after sharing a good meal. Let me guess, something you've killed together? Pris scoffed. Ideally.
Zenshiki fixed her eyes on the new challenge, staring the girl down.
Pezrin believes sharing a meal as a couple is intimate, a powerful statement of providing for one another. Not that I expect you could kill a Taurox. I can kill a Taurox, Belder frowned.
In spite of herself, Zenshiki blinked. Belder was the shortest Yorvanti in her class and seemed so unassuming. This was becoming intriguing. The other girls were more vocal about the matter.
Are you kidding, Willist?
Brazala was grinning, but she looked at Belder uncertainly, as if she had changed colours or sprouted horns. To Zenshiki's ears, it was a cutting remark. Not only did it deny her name, challenging a kill should be a serious dispute, but she watched without comment.
Look, I may be taking business courses to run the ranch, but my mothers didn't raise us to hide away in the office.
Belder pursed her lips.
Not everyone on our ranch is my family, but they're all sort of like my family. My mother and father raised me out on the land, and it's all my life. Everything, from birthings to butchering. Wow, I guess that makes sense, Cephis said offhandedly. You just seem pretty at home here on Shill. Hey, we have cities too. Well, I mean, 3 of them. I know there's not a lot, but it's not like we're primitive. Besides, it's even odds the last steak you ate came from there. Builder jutted her tusks defensively, looking around at the others. Anyway, that's not a bad idea, Zinshiki, but I doubt he wants me to kill a Turox for dinner. I suppose I can take him dancing again, as long as it's not the Typal. I'm keeping him away from all those guys. Male dancers? Zinshiki's Asaic flickered in excitement at the sudden revelation. This conversation had suddenly grown far more interesting. Dances? Like at the wedding? Pris snickered. Oh, goddess, she missed that bit. Hey, I missed it too, Leslie grumbled. Why didn't you take a video? I mean, we all got to see your first date. This was, well, sort of business, Blondie offered, though her blush wasn't half as deep as Belder's. Video wouldn't have been appropriate. Or allowed, I think. Well then, you should all stop talking about it. Leslie stuck her tongue out at Pris. It's not fair. Well, now you're hanging out with us, you're riding the big waves. Still, why not take him back to where you went out the first time? Prince said serenely, trying to look above it all. I have to admit, that's pretty good advice, Pesh. The girl had an irritating habit of calling Belder Willist as an endearment, as they were the only two Shulvanti not from this world. While it could be seen as demeaning, and it definitely ignored the honor of her taken name, Zinshiki kept her clause in place and chose to overlook the matter for the moment. But she was not going to tolerate being called Pesh. I'm not insensitive, she said calmly. I simply lack a reason to care. Ouch. But I suppose that's fair. You're new and all. Pris grinned, as if it was all in good humor. Give us a chance to grow on you. That sounds insidious. The thought died, stillborn in the back of her mind. She was on the hunt now. Perhaps, but I wish to hear more about these dancers. So, Lark has a defensive streak. Kamara watched as Kellark stuck to her plan and squeezed her sister's hand under the table. At this point they had a plan, if it was needed. For now, they, and Italy, could just watch things play out. So that's your plan? Desi cocked her head to one side. Seriously, just bomb them? No! Kellark crossed her arms, truculently. I was just upset. I'll go with the option for an ultimatum. If they don't comply, then I'll bomb them. Goddess, I'll take their entire country. It's barely the size of my thumb on the map. You don't think that's a bit of overkill? Desi winced, ever so slightly. Besides, why should they accept your police taking over inside their borders? They're a sovereign empire. Not much longer, Jacksmy snorted derisively. Though keep your hands off the rest. That used to be my territory, and I plan to get it back. Maybe, but I'm owed, and under the rules, I have a... Lark looked down to check her notes. A casus belli. A legitimate justification. I have the intel saying they were behind it. It still looks pretty flimsy to me, but hey, it's your lie, Jack shrugged. If you can sell it. What's that supposed to mean? Lark scowled indignantly. Exactly what I said. The sim is taking our inputs, but according to the rules, how everyone's population responds depends on the matrix of historical trends, as well as everyone's choices. It's not all just us. Jack bit her lip, considering the options. You have Desala on your side, and her cousins in England and Russia may be sympathetic, but they aren't your cousins, Nesfer, and everyone has to deal with popular opinion. If I were you, I'd be watching your back. Lark glanced over at Desala and frowned for a moment. You are going to write to Nesfer and ask Russia to stay out of this? Of course I am, Desala nodded back. I have every reason to keep her troops off your borders, because they might get on mine. Anyway, nobody needs this mess. Desi said nothing, as Kamara looked around the table. Fair enough. It looked like Lark was going through the ultimatum option, and was going to push it hard to force a fast resolution. That might work.
In the meantime, Jaxmi was trying not to look at the Greece, Hungary, and Romania sectors too obviously, while Desi minded Desala in Germany. That had possibilities for her empire. While France was some sort of republic, they also looked fairly capable, which in turn made striking west a bad move. Walking into a war in the east didn't look appealing either. Not yet, anyway. It might work out if everyone kept their wits, but at least she and Caslin had an out.
What about your cousin in England? Lark spoke up. You're going to write to them too, aren't you? About staying out of a war in Serbia? Desala shrugged. Why would Melondi even care?
Deep in the bunker, Captain Salani Tonis did her best not to cringe at her pod. She had 1 day and a wake-up, and she could get out of here. As long as nothing happened to screw it up, she and Sergeant Jelk were out of here for a whole shell, watching, well, it was a whole shell. I always put my pod first, but if they keep this up, I swear I'm going to kill them in their sleep before I get out of here. It's pretty neat the princess didn't cut out the video. Sergeant Vaco nodded up on the screen. I just wish we could see the scores. Hey, Carla, do you think we could grab a copy off his Omnet? No! Solani hadn't meant to sound quite that harsh, but they were not going to pull a home invasion over this shit. Captain? Carla asked uncertainly. Is everything alright? I mean, it's just a video game. First that cube and then chess. All I need is these two digging through his games. Nyosa's balls, who knows what they find? I'm not putting up with 3 weeks of another leisure skirt lana. It's not fair. Solani cleared her throat authoritatively, staying focused on the screen so she could calm down. It looked focused. Professional. That was the ticket. Look, you two have bets with the whole bunker on who wins this thing, right? Well, sort of. Right. And not just the overall winners. You have bets on who wins how much land, who wins the first aerial battle, who wins any naval battles as they form up, who wins the tactical engagements, all of them as they happen. You have bets on who wins the first armor engagement, whose armor performs best, who is winning by month and year. Do I have to go on? It's just harmless fun, Captain. Vaco's tone was respectful, but she still sounded like a kid caught slipping her tongue in the Hellcats Bowl. All the bets are for centi-credits, not real money. That's not the point. If you get a copy of this Strategic Command 1914, then some of the girls might think you're gaming the system. That could turn a fun pastime that we're allowing into a dispute that could ruin morale, and I'm not having it. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am. Good, she nodded. That's settled. Peace in our time. Now maybe I can get out of here. I wonder what other games he has. It was nearing the end of the day when Melondi slipped through the door and closed it behind her. Professor Davari smiled at her winsomely. It was an eerie transition watching her touch the controls on her Omnipad, as the smile washed away by degrees into something cordial, something businesslike, then into an expression devoid of anything beyond expectation. The room is sealed. Agent Davari was there in full now. We can speak freely now, Your Royal Highness. Princess Kalira Tazu felt a pang of annoyance. As a professor, Davari was competent, charming, and engaging with most people. She was even cheerful. As an agent of the interior and her personal handler, all those traits vanished as if they never existed. The woman was so single-minded. It would be maddening if she wasn't focused on her personal safety. Thank you for your time, Agent Davari. I know this is irregular, so I'll keep matters brief. I appreciate candor, ma'am. Davari cocked her head to one side in silent invitation. How may I be of service? I've been considering the attempt on my life. Several weeks ago I took steps to get a handle on things, and it's time we discuss them. I want to meet with you tomorrow. Officially. She studied Davari's face. There was nothing. Not a flicker of irritation nor a hint of emotion. The woman might as well have been a stone as she sat there, before nodding. "My time is yours, of course, ma'am. But if we are meeting officially tomorrow, I presume you have something more in mind?"
"I do."
Inwardly she glowered. Even allowing for all the surveillance, most of this had only begun to come together in her head. Why did it all seem so obvious to Agent Davari when it was still a mystery to her? She drew a quick breath and pressed on before annoyance got the better of her.
"I need to have a meeting with you, and the security detail in the bunker, and with the people on this list."
Davari accepted the file she swiped over and looked it over. "Very well, ma'am." This was not going to plan. The woman seemed so calm it was infuriating. Not because she wasn't competent, but this passive acceptance was just,
"I need your best effort on this."
Kalira managed not to set her hands on her hips like her mother did, but goddess she wanted to.
"You must have something to say, Agent Davari, so speak freely."
"I have a great deal to say, ma'am, but you've already made several decisions without me." Davari rolled her head from side to side. "I suppose the one question I have is why you are coming to me now."
"Frankly, I didn't want to trust anyone before I had to, but I need to trust you now."
Kalira looked at the agent and screwed down the riot in her stomach. Since this nightmare began, the only trustworthy person left at the palace had been Lady Wakama, then Indara and her family, but they were out of reach, which meant she needed this woman.
"Everyone I could trust is either gone with my mother or difficult to get hold of."
"I see. I must say I'm glad to see you're exercising judgment, even if I'm not certain I agree." There might have been a hint of a smile that flickered across Davari's features. "You've trusted a great deal to your friends, and even some who aren't, like Desala Sehat. Apparently even the manager of the tide pool enjoys your confidence."
"Fuck. I hope Mother doesn't find out." "I know them better than I know anyone else right now."
She lifted her chin defiantly. There was nothing left to lose by candor now,
including you.
The smile that had radiated away into space at the beginning of this meeting filtered back like dawn on the ocean, teasing the appearance before the reality. "Ah, pragmatism at last. Well, in that case, I can hardly blame you. As long as these are considered decisions instead of just flailing about, I'm greatly relieved."
"Sure, they are. Except I'm in neck deep now, so I might as well swim."
Kalira canted her head slightly, trying to keep hold of the situation, and vaguely suspecting Agent Davari was allowing her the illusion.
"You still don't seem very surprised."
"And the new names on this list, ma'am?" Davari raised her eyebrows. "Given how close you've become with Professor Warwick, I expected Professor Pelavon would follow in time. Really, it's largely a formality. As with all of the faculty, her background was fully documented before you arrived at the Academy last year." A lifetime of training kept something as depthless as, "oh," from slipping out.
"And the other name? I do have her on a contracted retainer, even if she doesn't know what that means yet."
"You want me to provide a security check on your best friend's sister by virtue of nothing more than attempted murder, ma'am? A woman who we have no background on, no reliable contacts, no history, and nothing about her warband beyond barely substantiated rumors?" A real smile came over Lamana Davari. "I love rumors. This will be fun." Tom read through the inputs from each girl and fed them into the sim accordingly. Strategic Command 1914 was plugging along, but only because of the mods. As for the girls, well... Zenshiki gobbling up colonies all along the coast of China was enraging the Chinese, but the NPC nation was largely helpless. It did mean the first air-naval conflict unfolded very, very differently. The only girl who hadn't punched the Total War economy option was Belda, but she'd only missed it by one turn. Germany's investments weren't going to offset the size of the Royal Navy, but their first skirmishes off the German coast had stung the Brits badly. Close to the coastline, German air power had been there in support. The English ships had virtually nothing in the way of air defences, and it had cost the Germans nothing at all. Meanwhile, on land, Desi had been rolling her funds into tanks and artillery, and while Sefer and Priss had followed suit, the early investments had swayed some battles for Germany, despite the heavier casualties. With her eyes warily on England, Desi urged Desala against taking the Germans into the Low Countries. Without that trigger event, the computer scaled down popular support, and the British options were limited to a tepid response. Malondi and Letzi still landed on the continent, making the most of what they had by avoiding German mines in the English Channel and landing in Brest before pushing into the front by rail. Despite the small mobilization and attrition from German mines and submarines, Letzi pressed on with what she had. Without the flanking actions into the lowlands, the Germans advanced, but their concentrated front turned into a head-on slaughter exacting a horrific toll on both sides. It had been a gamble, but despite the early German success, the French defences bent and wavered, then stabilised. Jacksmy created the Ottoman-Bulgarian alliance by calling it a protectorate, which the others accepted, but her claims on Hungary and Greece were setting off alarms with everyone. Even in the United States, Belder was taking notice by laying in AA refits to the American Navy. Just now, however, the tenor of events was being set by the Italians. Caslin stood up, pointedly ignoring Desala and Desi. True to the offered options, the twins had exercised a clause in their pact with Germany and Austria that kept them out of the war. But now... I don't care about that. Caslin crossed her arms. Prince Vittorio is a perfect match for Princess Mary. Far better than the Kaiser's sons. Agree to the marriage, and we'll come in on your side. What? Desala was on her feet now. My daughter is just as good as hers. Maybe so, Caslin sniffed, still not looking over their way. You still didn't do anything for us when Jacksmy came knocking, did you? I have every right to Greece, Jax muttered angrily, scowling over at the twins. It was mine before, and I want it back. So you say, but that leaves nothing in it for us, does it? Kamara joined in, standing up beside her sister. What do you say, Mel? I bet Vittorio can cook too. Damn. Hitting her up right before dinner, too. Strategic Command 1914 may have some issues with that one. Tom, are you coming to bed? Miv poked her head out of the bedroom door and canted her head, looking at him. Class was over for the week, and it was the night before Shell, but Tom was wrapped up in something on his Omnipad, and he nodded but didn't set it aside. Don't tell me you're still poking at the simulation. I can't have lost my sex appeal already. What? He blinked and then grinned, casting it down on the couch. No, honey. I just got a letter from my sister, and I kinda got lost in thought. I haven't written. Now I'm going to be telling her I've married 2 women and have a daughter. 2, maybe. She shook her head at that, padding out of the bedroom to sit down behind him. Usually he liked to wrap his arms around her from behind. It had felt so odd at first, being with a tall man, but she'd gotten used to it. She shook herself. The bedroom would wait. You don't talk about your family. I mean, I know about your wife and daughter, but what about the rest? I've never understood how you can be so distant. Ah, well, there isn't much. My half-brother was kind of a well-meaning schmuck. Not a bad guy, but pretty self-interested. The last time I heard from him was when he needed a kidney, and never a word after he found a better match. Tom gripped her hand and pulled her over to him. It was almost a relief. I'd given up on any attachments with him a long time before. Anyway, he passed away shortly after the landing. Cancer, before the Imperial medic stepped in. Miv sighed in pleasure as he slipped a hand under her robe, cupping her breast. It made it damn hard to concentrate when he started that, but this conversation was important. And this is from your sister? Yeah, Evelyn. Evie is my half-sister, but we're close and I love her to bits. He was nodding, and she watched his attention wander back to the Omnipad. We didn't talk much after the landings, after everything that happened. That was my fault, but it's okay. She's the kind of person who's good with people. Catching up is always easy, and you don't feel like she's forgotten you as soon as you walk out the door.
Okay. This has to be a human thing because it's certainly not Shovanti. I may not like both of my nieces, but I take my responsibilities to them seriously.
She slid back against him and fished out the omnipad, smiling as she offered it over.
So, what's it say?
All right. Tom drew a breath as he thumbed open the letter. Let's see. Dear Tom, I know time goes by fast, but I couldn't believe it when I saw you on the news. She goes on a bit about that. Looks like the story about the library made it back home.
Why are you skipping over it?
She grumbled in exasperation. His hand felt good, but sometimes understanding him was such work.
She should be proud of you.
Yeah, well, she lives up in Michigan and works at a lodge. Skiing country got booming again. Now it's laying down snow like it used to. She's an outdoor girl like our mother was.
You never told me that about your mother either.
He shrugged. I was the youngest.
Mm-hmm. Conversation for another time when Leia's here, but I'm not letting you out of the net. So, read it.
She elbowed his leg, rolling to one side.
Properly this time.
Yes, Professor. He sighed again. That was worrying, but she let it go as he started over.
Dear Tom, I need to keep this short as this isn't cheap. I know time goes by fast, but I couldn't believe it when I saw you on the news. The story says you're in the hospital and seriously wounded, but expected to recover. I hope by the time this reaches you, you're doing better. Anyway, if you don't write as soon as you get this, I'm going to be pissed. Things are going fine up here in Michigan. The snow is coming down, and we're getting a lot of business from some Rakiri families that have moved into the area. They seem like good people, and once they start mixing in with the deer hunting crowd, things settle pretty quickly. They like the backwoods instead of the coast. A lot of the smaller towns have gotten a boost, and things sorted out after that. Still haven't fit them for skis, but we're working on it. We don't see the Shovanti very often up here. There are a couple of pods patrolling the area out of Petrovsky, but you can tell they really hate it here in winter. Most things are pretty easy, though. It sounds like you've settled in there on Shill, but I still like to hear it straight from you, alright? The Resistance is dead as a doornail. The only news since you left is they sort of got that guy DeSantis. The Seminoles fingered him after he blew up a stuffed manatee at one of their casinos. Then he ran off into the swamp where a python strangled him. Guess an invasive species got him after all. Anyway, Florida's a sector instead of a state, but it's still the land of whack jobs. I'm staying up here. Tom, I know you didn't want to talk after the invasion, and I hope you're doing okay. Write soon, or I'll beat your ass. Much love, Evie. That isn't very long.
Miv watched him set the omnipad down.
She sounds nice, though.
She is. The message rates are a killer. Besides, I doubt she lets on that we're related. Different last names and all. The look of surprise must have shown on her face, and he grimaced. The Resistance may be nearly dead, but there are still hard feelings. Evie works in the hospitality business, so I don't blame her.
Well, Tom Warwick?
She rolled over between his legs, letting her robe fall open as she draped her body over his.
The rates aren't a killer here, so you'd better write back and tell her you're all right, and all about us.
Or you'll beat my ass?
Your wives are not boy bashers. I'll just have Shalea talk with you.
She leaned back, resting her chin on her hands.
She's got a mean streak.
All right, you win. I surrender. Tom held his hands up in the air, and she snuggled in, making herself comfortable. He was smiling, and all was right in the world.